Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
All right, my friends, once again, it is indeed time to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J. Stan McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning's talk champion in the house, Jonathan Small. Morning, Jonathan. How you doing?
Doing fine, Stan. It's a pleasure to be back here again. Missed last week, obviously, but
That's right. Your last week was a birthday week, born day week.
yeah. And if I would have had my way, I would have still did a show, but we had already made arrangements for me to for us to take the day off and not force it. So it makes better sense. But it was a nice day going up to Boston, seeing my babysitter, who I haven't seen in about 3 years since her retirement party, and a friend, and didn't see the family member that I wanted to see, Mr. and Mrs. Knight. But we'll make a rain check on that, and pretty much the year go by. Pretty soon it'll be Christmas time.
It'll be Christmas in a heartbeat. It's a winter wonderland out there right now.
Exactly. A little snow. Got up this morning, shoveled a little snow, cleaned off the car. So you did the same thing at your home base. Somebody did it.
Yeah.
It looks nice though. I mean, it looks
the official
pretty.
shoveler of snow came by and
okay.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it. I wasn't sure. I said, let me just make the suggestion. But I got up. I'm up on Monday mornings getting ready to do the show, and I'm up anyway. And, I said, let me just get that out the way and then, get the car warmed up and then eat and then wash up a little bit and come down to the studio. And a couple good I don't know if it was a good football game, but a couple blowouts yesterday.
The Buccaneers, man, they just blown away. It was so bad they had to take it off.
Yeah, and
we switched to a more progressive game.
Right, and actually the Eagles-Giants game was almost the same way most of the game, or getting closer towards the end. The Giants just couldn't do anything against the Eagles. And the Dallas Cowboys, I was nervous with that game. They was barely able to make a comeback. Kind of makes you wonder, though, can they beat the Eagles in a couple of weeks?
No.
Yeah. You know what? I think what happened is they gave Dallas a 17-point spread against the Houston Texans, and that can motivate another team. And then you might come into the game a little overconfident, thinking you don't have to do too much. And Houston just came to play. Dak Prescott made a couple turnovers, which definitely worries me a little bit, because you're not going to be able to get away with that against the top teams. I think he had 2 or 3 interceptions. And but the Eagles look like they could be the best team, or the 49ers. I mean, the 49ers.
No. The Eagles are the best team. What did they do? Win the Super Bowl?
Well, I mean,
because you even heard the analysts yesterday. Are the Eagles the best team? So as I think right now, it's not that I'm a big Eagles fan. My dad is, but it seems to me like they're the best. Maybe if the whole team walks to the next game on water.
Well, they got the best record. They are playing the best on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. So you're right. Statistically, you got to give them credit. It looks like their quarterback could be the MVP. So you're right. I mean, I'm just waiting to the end of the season. Sometimes you could be so dominant in the regular season, then you make a couple mistakes in the playoffs, and it could take away from your great season. So right now, you're right. They are the best team.
Well, what does one have to do? Be undefeated?
No, you got to win the Super Bowl.
Well,
You
the
gotta-
Super Bowl winner won that contest. Does that mean that they're necessarily the best team? The Super Bowl is not like the World Cup.
No.
'Cause the World Cup is the last team standing all the way to the end.
I understand that, but I think truthfully, if you ask any football team, would you rather win the Super Bowl and not be the best team, or be the best team and not win the Super Bowl? They'll take the Super Bowl.
Absolutely, because the Super Bowl is just one game.
Right.
And so who wouldn't want to win the game that's perceived to be the best game? However, the best team, that does not mean they're the best team. It means they won the Super Bowl. They get to go to Disneyland.
That's true. Most times, though, the best team, I guess you could say football, usually the odds are that they would win the Super Bowl, but it's because it's a one game. It's not like basketball or baseball where you play a 4 out of 7.
Right. Now,
series.
that would be a Super Bowl. You know, where it's a 3 games in a series or something like that. Is you have to win, you know. I don't know. But you know, you could get a wild card. Like, you could really be a bad team, win a wild card, and then still get in the Super Bowl. Is that correct?
That actually has happened in the past. You've had wild card teams win the Super Bowl, so it's rare, but it has happened. Usually, the team that wins the division, either the first or second seed, usually wins the Super Bowl. But there has been situations where wild card teams has won the Super Bowl, but usually the team that has the best record or the top records and wins the division. Because keep in mind, you still have to play your divisional playoff game. You have to play your conference championship game. So there's 2 games that you would have to play if you're not the wild card team to get to the Super Bowl. The wild card team will play 3 games total. So you got to still look at that into consideration too. College football is going to going towards a bowl tournament where you have 4 teams playing, and then the top 2 teams will play in the bowl championship. But just keep an eye on a couple weeks. You know, that Eagles Cowboys game, that's going to be a big game, probably the biggest rematch of the season. But I am a little concerned with how Dallas played yesterday. You can't take that, even though it was a win. Is how they won. You know, they didn't execute like a dominating team should do against a 17-point spread. But maybe the Texas wasn't that bad. But I know we have a guest. I don't want to. We could probably tie up the whole show on this topic.
Yeah, we can talk about Super Bowl and football later. So that brings us up to date on our football analysis for the week. No, let me stop. It is Monday, which means we always have a special guest. So if you're not watching this live, you always got to tune into the Monday program. Find it and tune in, because we always have special guests joining us at the top of the week to bring us needful information. They're always experts at whatever field of endeavor they're in. So Jonathan's the official booker of guests, so we'll let him have the honor.
Well, good morning to people out there on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show. This morning we have a very interesting guest, but a very mover and shaker, who has done a lot over the past 15 years since he's been in business, I believe. And I think he brings a lot to the table and a lot to this particular topic. The guest this morning on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show is the president and managing broker of Easy Street Realty, Georgia, located in the metro Atlanta area, no other than Byron Weston. Good morning, Byron. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you guys for having me today. I hear you guys talk about the weather and shoveling snow. Unfortunately, we don't have any snow outside right now.
Right.
It's a little chilly though. I think it's probably around 45, 50 degrees, but we have no snow. So that's a good thing. A lot of rain, but no snow.
I heard that actually. I spoke to someone yesterday and they told me that down in the Atlanta area. So keep your fingers crossed. Byron, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background briefly before we get into our topic of discussion?
Absolutely. Well, currently, I'm a managing broker and the president of Easy Street Realty Georgia. I've been president in this current office since 2016, and I have been down here in Metro Atlanta area since 2008. Throughout my career, sold probably over, helped facilitate over $500 million worth of sales volume wise, over 1,000 transactions, mentored over 200 agents in the Metro Atlanta area. And you name it, anything that I am the real estate expert, the go-to person when it comes to real estate here in Metro Atlanta area. So even I have certain agents that have been in the business 30 years and they still call me and bounce ideas off me on certain topics when it comes to real estate. So I've made myself known as the expert in the area. And yeah, I'm just delighted to be here and talk about anything that we need to talk about when it comes to Metro Atlanta real estate or just real estate as a whole on a national level as well.
Well, Byron, actually, this topic this morning is more, I guess you can connect it into real estate, but really it's about the new migration and the patterns, how the migration has shifted over the past, let's say, 50 years, I believe. We're getting close to probably a little bit past 50 years. The first migration was the South migrating to the North, I believe, from 1910 up until about 1970. And then over the past 50 years, there's been this new migration pattern that has started to accelerate of people from the North, Midwest, and other parts of the country moving to certain states in the South, just like yourself, actually. Do you kind of know what exactly has fueled this new migration to the South, in your opinion and expertise?
Well, I look at two separate waves of the new migration. I look at the wave of the new migration, probably I would say around 2002, maybe 99 to 2010. And then now we have another wave of individuals moving down that's probably started around 2015, 2016. The first wave of the migration was, hey, let's go down to Metro Atlanta, or let's go out to Atlanta. We can get a house for dirt cheap. A lot of people thought that the conception was they can actually get this 4,000 square foot house for $100,000. And in some cases that was true in the early 2000s, right after the crash. And then now we have this whole film, music, wave, and then also just a lot of people that are just getting tired of the weather. A lot of people are looking for more opportunities down, which seem to be happening here in Metro Atlanta. You can look at a lot of the statistics that says that African Americans tend to do the best in Metro Atlanta. We're the top 10 cities as of last year. So a lot of people are just jumping on that bandwagon saying, hey, I may want to open up a boutique, or I may want to open up a store, and they just feel that moving to a whole brand new area, there's a little bit better shot at that opportunity instead of just staying where they're currently from.
Well, Byron, first of all, when you classify the southern states, technically it's 16 states in total that's defined as southern states in the United States of America. Most of the growth, though, has taken place in 7 states: Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, and Florida has drawn the most population growth throughout the country going to the southern states. Your state where you reside at is one perfect example: Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, and Georgia. But first of all, what is it that you can kind of do in Georgia, Metro Atlanta, that you wouldn't be able to do in your home state, Michigan, the Metro Detroit area?
Well, I just feel that, and quote me if I'm wrong, I just think that with Metro Atlanta, because so many people have moved down within the last, 20 years, that it's kind of rare that you even find somebody that's a native of Georgia. So because there's so many people that have moved down, you don't know who to trust, right? Or you don't know what business to trust. Whereas if you look at Detroit or Metro Detroit areas, there's certain families that own certain things. Certain stores is owned by this family, certain dealerships are owned by this family. So when it comes to trying to just step out and say, hey, listen, I'm gonna step outside my box. I'm going to get away from a 9 to 5, and I'm going to go ahead and have my entrepreneur spirit doing something. I think it's just a little bit easier in my eyes when you're with a city where everybody's kind of just getting their feet wet, everybody's kind of competing with each other versus having a city where it's dominated by families of generations. It's harder to get your foot through the door because this family has ran these car lots on this street since 1930, whereas in Atlanta you have this person that started this car lot in 2015, and it's just like I said, it's just a little bit easier to get your foot through the door in my eyes.
Well,
And of
some
course,
fact,
studies show as well.
well, some factors people say the cost of living, like you mentioned earlier, with housing, certain tax structures for businesses, just certain the climate obviously can be favorable. So there's a combination of different factors that contribute towards the new migration, and there's some other factors, underlining factors too. And then if you get into a race issue, because there's a total population base as a whole that's moving to the south, and then if you break it down to different races, then you can look at the black race, you can look at the Hispanic race, probably in some areas of like Florida. Is this really a complex scenario to figure out, or is it real simple to figure out why so many people are moving to particularly 7 states in the South?
I mean, I think it's simple. You do have, like I said, certain tax situations in other cities. I know Texas is big. A lot of people are moving in that direction because they can avoid paying certain taxes. In our area, I think the weather does play a big part. I think that you feel good. You don't have to worry about walking outside and having 2-degree weather. I think that you can feel like you get more accomplished sometimes if you don't have these crazy snowstorms or keep you isolated in the house. I just think that a lot of people are just looking for the type of living where you have mostly sunny days, and like I said, that's why a lot of people migrate to Florida, Texas, like you said, Virginia. I always see North Carolina has been pretty big with Charlotte and Raleigh as well. So I think the weather does play a big, huge part. We are seeing a lot more jobs. Atlanta area is taking off when it comes to technology. You have big companies like Google, Microsoft, Airbnb. They all have headquarters down here, and then there's other large companies that are putting their feet in at Metro Atlanta. Let's not even talk about NBC and the Tyler Perry studios. So a lot of people are looking for opportunities, and they're like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna pack my bags and go to Atlanta to get a better opportunity. And a lot of people come down here without even having a job, and they make it. So,
Well, that was almost, I think, the case in the first wave of migration. I know my father, who I didn't really grow up with, but I know he came from Chattanooga, Tennessee, to New Britain, Connecticut, and he found a job pretty much the same week that he got here without even having a job lined up. So, and I believe you told me your parents came from what, South Carolina?
yeah, my
To
parents came from Columbia, South Carolina, in the late 70s and late 70s, very early 80s, and they migrated to Detroit, Michigan. That was when you would see a lot of families moving from South Carolina, Alabama. They're all going to work with either with Ford or GM. So working with Chrysler, Ford, or GM, those plants were hiring at mega rates. So they ended up, once they got out of college, packed their bags, jumped in the car, and my dad was fortunate to get a job with Ford.
Well, you mentioned though earlier that you have known people or people that have come down to Metro Atlanta even without a job. Would that be fair to say they came down with little resources, little money, or they just came down on their own will? I mean, what is the whole strategy of how people are moving though towards the new migration? Is most people moving with a job lined up, coming to college, having a business plan? I mean, what's the whole scenario of how people are moving actually?
I see a lot of people I talk to, they're moving down they're trying to either get job transfers or they're moving down to Atlanta trying to get a job. For myself, I did not have a job when I moved down to Atlanta. Once I graduated college, I was able to talk to some counselors and network with some individuals that own several businesses here in Metro Atlanta that went to the same university that I went to. So immediately when I got down here, I was able to set up a couple meetings and then start actually being like a mentee to some business owners where I was able to kind of work with them until I was able to find stable employment. So I think a lot of people are the same way, especially during the pandemic, we kept our doors open. A lot of other states were closed, and we saw a lot of people migrating here to Metro Atlanta area, looking for the opportunity. Or that one time they received a stimulus check, and they felt that check was enough to, pack the bags and go ahead and just move down south.
But still, again, when you look at the 7 states, the numbers are not growing or people moving in high numbers to, let's say, Mississippi, Arkansas, West Virginia. So even though you can say it's warm weather, it's a lot of other low cost of living, there still has to be something, I think, unique, or not unique, but something that's really driving, like a driving factor of why 7 key states are really drawing this new wave of migration. And then states like Mississippi, Arkansas, West Virginia is really not drawing that numbers of people. Do you have any kind of explanation or insight on why it's 7 key states that's drawing the numbers and maybe 7 or 9 other states that's really not drawing the high numbers?
I would say employment. Number one, I would say that a lot of people are going where the big companies are going. Some of the key states like that we're talking about, Virginia, North Carolina. I think you mentioned that North Carolina, of course, Georgia. There's companies that are planting their feet here, and when they're planting their feet in these certain states, they're hiring at a large rate. Whereas Mississippi, Arkansas, I mean, how many times do you hear Google saying, hey, we're going to open up a facility that has 100,000 employees in Arkansas or Mississippi? So in those cases, those are the people that are moving. We're seeing people that are migrating from Mississippi and Arkansas to Georgia as well. So it's just for better living, and that's what it's all about, having better living.
Key statement that you just mentioned. Stan, do you have any questions or any commentaries you want to add to this conversation?
Well, the one thing that I was kind of thinking about, he actually addressed, which was the pandemic, and people. It seems as though people move to opportunities, and you talk about the first migration, lots of opportunities, specifically, or primarily rather, for African Americans, people of color, black folk moving north. And now with, I think, the warm and fuzziness of the north wearing off, people start to go back home.
Right.
And there's a lot of opportunity. But people move, it seems, towards opportunity. And so my question was like, in what way did the pandemic affect that? But he said something I thought was key, and that was, the stimulus checks that people got. For many people, that was all they needed to make that step. And that was something I had not considered or heard in terms of people receiving their the little stimulus checks that they got. Because there's a lot of folk looking for people to work for them here.
Right.
But people are bailing out. They're leaving. So you answered most of my questions. So thus far.
So let's look at the good cities, right? Let's look at Chicago. So if you look at the migration, a city like Chicago is losing their population at a rapid rate. But Chicago also has a great downtown area. It's always was known to be a booming city. It has a lot of key players when it comes to large corporations and companies planting their feet in that Metro Chicago area. But why are people leaving Chicago and moving down south? So would you say the weather, or would you just say the congestion? Would you say the crime? Maybe all those things take a big part of what's happening. But if you look at the numbers, Chicago is just getting hammered with people just migrating, leaving that Chicago area.
Well, you have anything that you want to say, Stan?
I was going to say, it would be interesting to do a kind of a semi deep dive into what he, had just brought up, because the, crime, even though there's a great downtown, I mean, there could be a lot of factors, but even with a great downtown, it's not enough to keep people. And the reason that sticks in my mind is because where we live here in Hartford, there's such an emphasis with the current administration and prior administrations, and hopefully not so much with future administrations, on downtown. Like, if you build it, they'll come. But there's got to be more that keeps people. We're going to blow through this break.
Okay.
There's got to be there's got to be more to keep people in your city than just a downtown.
Well, let me just address this and actually ask Byron a question simultaneously. Atlanta has somewhat of a crime problem. I don't know if it's as bad as Chicago, but it's drawing a lot of national attention. Atlanta has a downtown. It has issues, homelessness, poverty. But I think what you have down there is you have this unique metro area. And I think that's really where your population growth has really been targeted at, not so much people moving from the North, Midwest directly into Atlanta. You having people moving to this metro area with a lot of more space, homes, things to do, building up communities right in your own counties. And I think at the same time, if you still have the image of the Black Mecca of Atlanta and a lot of corporate businesses and things to do, that's still in place. So when you was mentioning about Chicago, and I'm not an expert on Chicago, but I'm just saying a big city, suburbs, obviously, but I don't know if it's set up the way it's set up that you have down in Metro Atlanta with so many counties right outside the city. Saying that, has that really been the driving force of the growth into Georgia, Metro Atlanta, more than anything else?
I think when you're looking at the migration, most people they really migrate to Atlanta, and then once they're in Atlanta for a couple of years, they start to go to the outskirts and realize that living in the city of Atlanta can be very expensive. Also, if you have children, in most cases, to get into a school that's 6 or 7 out of 10, you're probably going to have to be in a very expensive area. So that's why they're migrating to some of the suburbs and the surrounding counties, because you can get good schools and you can have more affordable living. And now we're starting to see that they're building up some of these suburbs where you don't even have to really go to the city of Atlanta. I live in Gwinnett County, which some people may know about. Gwinnett County is one of the largest counties in Metro Atlanta, and the growth has exploded within the last 24 months in Gwinnett County. I mean, as far as politics, far as everything, it's just infrastructure. We're actually starting to see companies have their headquarters in the Gwinnett County area. So to answer your question versus some of the other things, I think that in a whole, most people can come down to Atlanta, and if you have a drive, you can get a job within 7 days. I mean, it may not be your dream job. It may be a job working in a restaurant, or a job working at a bar, or a job working at a call center. But I'm pretty confident if you move down, you can get a job in 7 days. And I'm not sure other areas across the country you can get a job that fast. I know in Chicago, and I'm just talking about Chicago, I know in certain states there's unions. This is not a union state. So that plays a big role as well. I know sometimes unions can help, but in our type of situation, it's easier to get a job if it's not a union state.
Well, I'll say one thing. I have a guest lined up next month from Metro Dallas area. Mm-hmm. And I remember we had attorney Terry Woods on a couple years ago talking about Dallas. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that he's never seen a place throughout the country where a person can go with just a willingness and drive and really, if not reach their full potential, really be headed in that direction. And when you talk to a lot of business people in Dallas and how much growth that they've had in Dallas, it may have this reputation of a racist state, a state that has issues that people may not like. But I think when you're having great opportunities, it's almost like you're winning a football game. There may be some underlying things that you may not like about Dallas. The hot weather is flat and all some other factors. But if you're making good money, you're living a good standard of living, you feel confident about yourself, you can kind of offset some of those factors. And the only thing I would kind of maybe disagree with you about Atlanta, and maybe you can kind of clarify this. People say Atlanta's like this state where you got to have this hookup, this connection. You know, if you go down to Atlanta looking to break into the media entertainment industry, thinking you're going to meet people like Tyler Perry, and this is probably not just unique to Atlanta, but it's more of a who you know's town, or is that really like a myth? Is it really what you just said? Atlanta's the type of place that you can come down there with a drive and positive attitude and really find a job and find a future?
Absolutely. I think that it's just with anything, you have to network, you have to get out there. I mean, of course, if you're sitting at home or sitting in your apartment, you know, you're not going to be able to meet Tyler Perry. I mean, I would say that you have to meet the next Tyler Perry, or you have to figure out your niche. But obviously, if you're out there with the movers and shakers, you can go anywhere in Metro Atlanta. Well, most places in Metro Atlanta, you can run into somebody that's famous. I mean, on a daily basis, it's normal to see athletes or top musicians or actors out to eat with you, or even at certain networking events. So my thoughts are, and I think what works for a lot of people, is you just have to get out there and go ahead. I mean, look at what's happening right now with a lot of these mega podcasters and these influencers. They're out there moving and shaking, and they're able to meet with the right people. It's just and open the right type of doors. But I want to go back to talk about the crime, because I didn't really answer that question when you talked about the crime in Metro Atlanta and what's going on with the crime. So we have saw a spike in the crime, like I said, within the last, it's really just came around that pandemic. And I think that a lot of the crime, what happened is a lot of people were coming to Atlanta because we were open and other places were closed, and they were preying on each other. You may have one group that had a certain type of drama back at home, and now they've relocated to Atlanta, and now another person from that same town is relocating in Atlanta. Now they're fighting or causing a lot of issues. And then we also have an issue with children. We have a lot of teenagers who have no guidance that are running the streets late at night, and some days gone for days. And these teenagers have, like I said, no guidance, so they're causing a lot of issues where they're carjacking, they're involved with certain gangs, and that is a big part of our crime. So I just think that if we can work on programs for the teens or the children's, that will help the crime issue. And then also, if we pay attention to everybody that's moving down and realize that just screen them more. How can I say that? But it's just pay attention to people that are relocating down, because they're the ones in a lot of the cases bringing a lot of the crime to our area.
Well, see, the thing about it is, I thought if you're going to be, and I guess you got different ways that people are moving, but I would think if someone is moving for a better opportunity, looking to buy a home, they wouldn't be the classification of people as criminals. But I guess you got other people moving too, that is looking for other factors. I mean, they may not be looking for a job. They may be looking for the underground economy. So Atlanta has this reputation, if it's not a reputation, that it's an all-night party town. There's a lot of drugs distribution that goes through that part of the country, human trafficking. So again, I don't want to take this show into that type of area, but I think when you're saying people are moving down and they're bringing some of the problems, that kind of is telling me that everybody that's moving is not moving the way people think they're moving towards being a productive citizen, towards buying a home, towards looking for a better opportunity. Is that kind of what you're saying about some of the factors of people
The
moving?
ones that are actually doing a lot of the crime. There are a lot of people that are moving down that, like you just said, they're looking for just to better their career, and they want to buy a home, and they want to get an affordable home, and they want to raise their children down south. They want to raise their children with good weather. So yes, you have a lot of people like that. We see, well, in my profession, I see a ton of people that relocate from New York. New York is probably one of our number one spots where people are moving and moving to Metro Atlanta area. And like I said, if you have that drive, you can do really well. I can't even name how many African American millionaires I know. And I feel that when I was in Metro Detroit area, yeah, yes, I knew several African American millionaires, but there's no comparison to the ones that I know now. And not only that, how fast that they were able to establish that wealth. We're talking, 2 to 3 years and they're multimillionaires, whereas, Metro Detroit area, sometimes you have to work 10 to 15 years to get that right idea to become that multimillionaire.
Well, that's again telling me that maybe the South has surpassed some of your northern and midwestern states. In the past, it was totally different in the first migration wave because you had the industries up in the north and the Midwest, the factories, and you even had unions opportunities. So you just felt at that time span, like your parents probably felt as well, that there was just better opportunities that you could seize in the north and the Midwest, California also, that you couldn't do in the South. But if you're telling me you're able to run across people that can become millionaires or close to becoming millionaires in a shorter period of time, there has to be something that the South and those states have, like you just mentioned, that the Midwest or the Northeast just don't have or just not available. And again, I don't want to take this into a different direction. And man, Stan, we could talk about this even after, but I can also bring it up now. I think the report indicated that in Connecticut, you only have one black mayor and maybe 2 other minorities out of 169 cities and towns. Did you see that article a couple of weeks ago or last week, that report that Dan Herr has written from the Hartford Courant?
I'll have to check it out because I did not see that. I knew that in the big 5 cities that there are no black mayors, but I was unaware that throughout the whole state that there were that few.
That few, and I'm saying it's not. And I think in Atlanta you haven't had a white mayor probably 40 to 50 years.
40, at least 40 years. Yeah.
So I guess it's just common, like you say, to see in Atlanta black successful people running government agencies, mayors, high-ranking positions in high numbers. And then Connecticut, I mean, I'm not going to put the state down, but I'm just saying if that report indicates we only have 3 minorities, I don't even like to use that word, but 1 black mayor in Bloomfield, which is like a small town, and out of 169 cities and towns, no black representation as a mayor. Again, I don't want to take that. I don't want to take the show in that direction right now. But I'm just saying there has to be things that I think the South has. I know the South has more black people in numbers anyway, so you can't
considerably more than
Connecticut.
Yeah.
But that's still dismal, though. If that's report is the case, that's nothing to feel proud about, I think. But maybe it's nothing to feel ashamed about, or is it something to feel ashamed about?
Well, as you say, we want to track the show into a negative slide. But I think the problem there is not one so much of Connecticut, but rather the attitude and mindset of black folk in the cities of Connecticut, where the majority population is quote unquote black and brown, but the black and brown people have voted for a Caucasian mayor. So that speaks to the mindset of the voter more than it does the state. The state is not seen as a state with a high black population to begin with.
Right.
But down south, I think it is important that you see, or as you're noting, there are blacks not just in the mayor's office, but throughout the government and making critical decisions, bringing individuals to, the state, bringing companies and corporations to the state, where the state is economically viable and it's growing. You got one of the world's most notable airports in Atlanta. So there are things that are happening in the South where just the way you view your worldview is reestablished by being down south, because you see things that give you a sense of purpose and pride and a sense of wholeness. You're not like chasing after some golden ring or trying to get through the glass ceiling. You're looking down on the glass floor. You're wearing the ring. It's not like it's something that's always elusive that you hope someone gives you. You can go down there and you can take advantage of the opportunities and make those opportunities work for you, and then extend that to other people.
Yeah, good answer, Stan. Actually, very good, accurate answer. Nothing more to say about that. But Byron, I know we talked off of the air that you was able to get your parents and I believe your brother to move down to Metro Atlanta. If you don't mind, could you kind of explain, was that an easy process, or was that real kind of a simple to convince them to come down to Georgia?
Well, I was, like I said, I moved down to Metro Atlanta, or to Atlanta, in 2008. And by 2010, I started to figure everything out. By 2012, I have a brother that's 2 years older than me. He was still in Michigan. By 2012, my brother was able to get a job transfer, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, I got a job transfer to Georgia. I think I'm gonna take it." And he moved down, stayed with me for 6 months until he was able to find a rental. And then from that rental, I was able to sell him a house as well. So he loves it. He said it was the best decision of his life. He has 3 kids and a wife. So that's 5 that came down from Michigan. And then my parents at the time had moved from Michigan when I was in college to Chicago, because the economy in Michigan was really very, very, very bad. When the auto industry belly flopped. So when the auto industry early 2000s belly flopped and they had to get the bailouts, things were just going real south. So they were laying off a lot of people. And at that time, my dad had took a position in Chicago. And once he retired, he moved down to Georgia. I was able to sell them a house. And, it's just everybody likes it. One thing that I want to backtrack on, why I think that makes Atlanta such a great place, is people tend to stick together. And then the motivation, when you're driving around, you're seeing all these Bentleys and Ferraris and Lamborghinis, and that kind of motivates you. Sometimes you need that motivation. It's like that extra push that, hey, I can see this other guy driving a Bentley and this guy driving a Rolls Royce. I can get that same Rolls Royce. I can get that same Bentley. And I think that once you see it, you feel it, and once you feel it and you breathe it, you manifest it. And I think that that's what happens, and that's why a lot of people tend to do really well in Georgia, Metro Atlanta, and everybody's sticking together, because everybody's kind of here on their own, essentially, except for some of the natives. They tend to help each other out. If you need to call an attorney, you can call an attorney, and attorney probably won't even charge you just to try to take your case, if that is a situation. So long story short, I think sticking together is a very key and vital part of why Metro Atlanta is so successful.
Well, do you see this new wave of migration continuing to accelerate or just continue to grow? Is there going to be scenarios that you don't think the northern, midwestern parts of our country can really compete with keeping their population? I mean, what's some of the factors that you see in the future of how this new wave migration is going to continue to move towards?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that 20 years, the migration may go back up north. And a lot of that has to do with the weather, because every year it's becoming hotter and hotter in the summertime, right? So, if we're getting the heat index, like Texas right now is at some days in the summertime is 110 degrees. Well, as we have global warming, that 110 degrees in the next 20 years can go to 125 or 130 degrees. So with that heat being so unbearable, you're not going to be able to go outside. It's going to be hard to have just any type of fund. So they're going to actually go back up north, and we're starting to see it. Look at Detroit. I don't know if you guys have been to Detroit and saw what the downtown has become within the last 24 months. I mean, they have high-end fashion stores down there. They've Dan Gilbert has went ahead and really cleaned up a large portion of that downtown area, and now people are moving downtown Detroit. Where when I was leaving Detroit, I could have bought a piece of property for 50,000. Now that same piece of property is 800,000 to $1 million. So I believe strongly that as the South becomes heavily populated, people will migrate back up north, but it's going to take about 20 more years.
So, but do you see the sudden migration pattern kind of? Well, I guess you answered my question that it will have to slow down if people are moving back to the north, or do you still see people moving to the south for the same reasons that they're moving now?
Yeah, I think that we're still going to have people that's going to move down the south in a short term, like maybe a 5 year span of time, but eventually, these companies will it's not going to be an African American thing. It's just going to be everybody's moving to the South. You're going to have a lot of people from, Seattle or from San Francisco, and it's going to be very expensive. Atlanta will become the next LA when you're talking about housing prices and the cost of living. So therefore, for African Americans, it's not going to be as affordable to move to Metro Atlanta like it would have been, 5 to 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago. So therefore, that's going to have a big trickle effect on who's coming down. And I think that people are going to gravitate to some of these other areas that's a little bit cheaper to live. Whereas, you're looking at your Cleveland area, you're looking at your Detroit area, and other areas that African Americans can, plant their feet there and they start a family. But if the rate that we're going and, looking at our housing market, looking at the cost of living, 5 to 10 years, like I said, Atlanta's not going to be an affordable place. I mean, it's not even affordable to live in Atlanta right now.
Well, I was just going to ask you that question. I hear reports right now that it's very expensive to live in the Atlanta city proper, and it's even getting more expensive outside. But I think, Byron, it's like anything else. If you have a good quality and good factors of things to do where people want to be at, I mean, I've heard reports that, to live in Alpharetta, you got to have almost a 6-figure salary because it's just a great business climate. It has a lot of things to do. But if you go out to the boondocks, I mean, some areas that's not that populated and nothing to do, they will be cheaper. I mean, Canton, I think there's a place called Canton, Georgia, someplace like that. Not much to do like Alpharetta. I mean, isn't that going to still be the same factor? If you have a lot of things to do that people like, it's going to keep the price up comparable to a place that has very little activity?
Yeah, I will agree, but we just were hit with a big wave that kind of put us steps back in the middle class, and that was having these hedge funds buy up all our real estate. So yes, you're absolutely correct. Certain areas, Alpharetta, good luck trying to get a house in Alpharetta. You have to have a 6-figure salary. There's no maybe 6-figure. You have to have a 6-figure salary unless you're staying in an apartment, an old apartment complex at that. What's happened in Metro Atlanta within the last 24 months, 31% of our homes were bought by hedge funds. So now a lot of these hedge funds are just sitting on these homes and turning them into rentals. But that's going to have a big effect on the next generation, right? And the reason why I say that is because my kids now have less inventory to purchase a home if they want to buy a home, because the hedge funds are hoarding 31% of the properties. So, and they're hoarding these properties specifically in African American communities, like areas close to the airport or areas maybe far down 20. You guys probably don't know the highways, but they're buying up every house that pretty much would rent for under $2,000. These hedge funds are buying them up. So those are less houses that we have to buy, we can buy. And then if we're bidding against the hedge fund, we're going to lose anyways, because these guys are paying over asking for the home and they're buying them in cash. In some cases, they were buying them with no inspection. It's like, I just want to hold the house. So it's just that will be a big trickle effect on our real estate within the next 5 to 10 years.
That's interesting. Now, in what way, how does that impact the community dynamic? with them? Is there aim to maximize profit, or is there something else perhaps behind these purchases?
Well, they're looking at the migration as well. They're looking at a lot of people are migrating to Atlanta, and now the banks, since the stock market has kind of been a little shaky, well, we're talking about in the last year, a lot of the banks are saying, okay, well, instead of putting all of our eggs into the stock market, which the stock market hasn't really bottomed out just yet, we're going to hold into real estate, because the real estate market, once the pandemic hit, or recession, somewhat what they're calling a recession, the housing market still has not taken the hit that some of the stocks have taken. So these large companies, JP Morgan Chase just said they're going to buy up, I think, what's 2,000 houses in Metro Atlanta within the next year. And a lot of these companies and hedge funds are buying them to turn them into rentals. So they want to be your landlord. They don't want you to own property. And the problem with that is, we can print more money, but we can't print more land. So if you're taking all of our houses in all of our neighborhoods, it's just, in some cases, you go into these neighborhoods, they have 5 or 7 houses that are just vacant. They're just sitting there. And they're just, these are houses that should have went to the middle class, or people that really are going to use that house for their family. But they're letting the hedge funds buy them. Now there's a bill that will get passed that hedge funds cannot own more than 100 homes. So hopefully they can pass this bill, and that will stop certain things, because like I said, right now, you have companies that bought up thousands and thousands of properties in Metro Atlanta.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess it's almost the old saying. I mean, I guess the grass looks greener from the other side of the fence. And certainly we talked about some good assets that the South have with this new migration pattern, but there's also some realities that still exist from what you're saying with the hedge funds buying the property and turning them into rentals. I think, in my opinion, I think you're going to continue a wave of people moving to those 7 key states in the South. But they may start to look at the other states and saying it may be more affordable to move to Alabama or a Mississippi. It may not be as attractive or appealing as Georgia, Atlanta, Charlotte, Dallas, Houston. But if you're forced to do something that you just can't do, and this is your best option, I think people will start at some point to look at other states in the South. But I don't know if they're going to be able to draw the population base that the 7 key states have drawn. But I think if housing costs continues to go up and it becomes more competitive, you may be forced to look at some other alternatives, and you may not be able to afford to live in Atlanta, to be honest, or Metro Atlanta, without making a certain amount of money.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm starting to see a lot of people moving to the Macon area and Alabama. I'm heavily involved in a lot of investments, and I actually help a lot of firms here do their fix and flips. And we're starting to see waves of property in Birmingham, Alabama, and waves of property into the Macon area. So they're already starting to spread out, because they realize that Atlanta's saturated, far as trying to get an investment property, and they have to keep going farther and farther and farther. So I will agree with you that I think that people will start to look at the other areas, and our food crisis. So right now, a lot of people are saying, hey, let's get as much land as we can, because we don't know about this food crisis. They keep on playing with our food, meaning that and a lot of people are starting to say, hey, I want to grow my own food. I want to raise my own cattle. So they're having to go into the rural areas, so they don't have to deal with the grocery stores as much. And I'm starting to see that we will have a national or a world food crisis within the next 5 years. And you can see all the big players like Bill Gates has bought so much farmland within the last 5 years, 6 years, that I believe he's the #1 owner of farmland in the United States as of right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Brian, it's like you do your homework beyond just as a realtor. I mean, I think you kind of sense the whole big picture, not just one aspect of it, that we do need to deal with the whole, as Jesus dealt with the whole man approach. It's one thing to have a nice house and a nice car and nice furniture, but you need food to eat. You need your health. I mean, health should be your #1 focal point. And how's the health services in Georgia and Atlanta? Do y'all have good health services overall?
We have good health services. They're dominated by certain hospitals, but yes, we have. I feel like we have strong health services in Metro Atlanta area.
What's some of the other factors that you would caution people about if they're looking at moving to the Georgia as a state and Metro Atlanta as a area city? I mean, what are some of the important factors that you would just caution people if they're going to move down there?
Well, I would actually say do your research. It's very important that you do your research because you don't want to be in a certain pocket or a certain side of town that is not desirable. Like I said, if you have children, you want to make sure that your children are in the best schools that you can afford. I would also say that when it comes to working, find the field that works for you. A lot of people come down here to Metro Atlanta because they try to get into the film industry, or they're just following what they see on TV and just realize that a lot of the stuff that you see on TV is fake. So a lot of your younger crowds are seeing these celebrities doing this and that and this and that, and like you said, everybody's partying all night, but sometimes that's not the case, and people do work hard. So do your research, find out what areas, and get with somebody that can help you make a decision when it either comes to housing or it just comes to your safety or your well-being.
Do you see any more of your family or close friends that you know of in Michigan looking at moving to the South?
Most of my friends from Michigan live in Atlanta, or some of them have moved to Atlanta, but their parents got sick and they had to move back to Michigan. I see some states like I have some family in Chicago, Illinois, and for some reason they are stuck in their ways. They're not going to move. And then for the rest of my family is literally already down here. I have family in North Carolina and I have family in South Carolina. And because it's so close, they just drive to Atlanta, once or twice a month. But there's kind of staying put in those areas. But I do see a trend of people still moving from Michigan because I have a lot of people that call me and say, "Hey, Byron, I have such and such that's moving down," or have somebody call me last week that's moving down from Indiana. So I still see a lot of people moving down to Georgia. Which, as far as my family and friends, most of them are already here.
Right. Do y'all have, what about the help? Well, I had already asked you that. What about the retirees? Is that going to continue? Because the people say the retirees can do very well in the South. Is that a key factor, or do you still see that continuing as a lot of our retirees moving down to the South?
I think the retirees will continue to move down the South. It's still the cost of living is cheaper for retirees because we have certain tax brackets that breaks. If you're over 62, you pay like a quarter of the taxes. So, for an example, my parents went from paying $12,000 to $14,000 a year in taxes to $2,000 a year, and the house was really valued at the same value. It's not like they had a way bigger house or a value way more when they're living in Chicago. I'm talking the same exact value on the house, and they've shaved off about $10,000 a year just on their taxes.
Byron, I think we're out of time. I'm hearing our theme music. I guess we're running out of time for this particular segment, and there could possibly be a part two and another different topic. I think you bring a lot to the table. I mean, we've talked about having you on over the past month or so, a few months or so, and I'm glad everything kind of worked out. I don't want to get into this, but I mean, this was like a very last minute almost, but no, I had planned to have you on at some point, but I didn't realize it was going to be this Monday. So again, I'm still glad everything worked out for yourself, and I was very privileged to be able to listen to what you had to say. You're a very informative, articulate person, and I think you brought a lot to this particular topic in this show, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me. I would love to do part two. And like I said, just have a little bit more planning, a little bit more time. And like I said, man, you guys get out there, don't shovel, don't get caught in too much snow.
Right.
But like I said, man, if you guys have anybody that's looking to move into the Atlanta area, please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Will do.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us. I look forward to part two. We talk about go into a little bit deeper about the the mindset of people and what makes them move around.
Right.
But thanks a lot. It was great to meet you, sir.
All right. Thank you. You guys take care. Have a great day.
All right.
Okay,
God bless
same
you,
to
man. All right. Dynamite.
Yes, Dynamite. I mean, had a topic, had a guest lined up for this Monday, and, had a death in the person's family. They couldn't do the show. You suggested, what about Eric Coleman? And I said, no, I got my mind on somebody else if he wasn't available. But it was a good suggestion.
If you needed a guest.
Yes. I mean, I really appreciate that. And it's something about, I want to talk about Eric Coleman. He made a statement I put on Facebook, and let's, I guess, take this break.
All right. We'll take a short break. And we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Stick and stay. Morning Talk.
Okay.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Oh, yeah. There it is. It's a look of what summer looks like. A little taste of spring.
Spring, yeah.
Well, it's a little ways off. It's Morning Talk. I'm J. Stan McCauley along with Jonathan Small in the house, Studio 1A. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 8 o'clock, tune in for Morning Talk. And then 8 p.m., tune in for Morning Talk. So Morning Talk in the evening, Morning Talk in the morning.
Yeah, definitely keep it going.
Keep it
Monday
going.
and
Yeah.
Tuesdays. And, makes the format throughout the week. People always have a show at some point at 8 o'clock to look at, 8 in the morning, 8 at night. And,
You get caught up on things happening locally. Share with family and friends.
Well, I mean, as I mentioned before the break, I put this out on Facebook. I got to be careful what I put out. But, I have my facts in order. I can't document the statement that I heard this on. But I know there was Eric Coleman, who's running for mayor of Hartford, was on a few shows last week. And it didn't come out of his mouth directly, but it was, I guess, suggested that if he became mayor, Hartford would look at possibly paying some gang members or some criminals not to engage in crime. I think Richmond, California is what I put the other story on, that they got some pilot program or some stipend program that was implemented, that they pay certain criminals or gang members or people coming out of prison not to engage in crime. And I think it was $1,000 a month. I don't know how many in numbers, and I don't have all of that facts, documented in place to really elaborate. But I know, do you think that's needed though? Do you kind of like that idea, even as an idea, to pay people not to engage in crime? Do you think it's something that should be looked into, or what's your take on that?
I think people that engage in crime need to go to jail, not to the bank.
Not to the bank.
Yeah, I guess if you look at it as a bottom line cost dollar amount, is it cheaper to pay somebody $1,000 a week, which would be what, $52,000 a year?
Well, this was a month though, actually, the 1,000. But I mean, if you want to pay somebody $1,000 a week,
yeah. Well, we'll just take it to $1,000 a week because $12,000 a year is, But I mean, from once a month would be $12,000 a year. Once a week would be $52,000 a year. What does it cost to incarcerate someone a year? So as a bottom line number, it may be cheaper, but then you wind up having everybody going to crime because that's where the money is, where then they are paid not to commit crime.
Right.
So, people will take the path of least resistance to get the things they want. I think criminal attitude is not motivated necessarily by money. It's motivated by a criminal mindset. The bandit takes from you and adds to their pile, and you take a loss and they take a gain. And so I don't think that's a good idea. Although I did see a news segment where he was talking about crime. And he said that we have to try, I'm paraphrasing it. He was suggesting that new things be tried. And then he said, for example, or for instance, in California, they're doing this. That is something that we might, alluding to not necessarily embracing that, but that you could be as radical as going all the way there. From here to where you're doing hard time for the crime you did to paying people not to commit crime. So I think there's broad room for discussion.
Right.
I don't know that it came across that way in the report, but I do know that Judge Coleman is on record as stating that being a judge, he appreciates and understands that some people need to be in jail.
Right.
Bottom line, period. So he's not soft on crime. So I think if you take it within the full context of that, and a lot of times those nuances are not picked up in a sound bite, which is why politicians have to be careful of sound bites.
Well, I think the best thing to do, and you gave me the invitation. I mean, I decide who I would like to book on the show, but obviously I think it'd be better for him just to be a guest on the show and really ask him that question, talk about it in the ins and outs. I mean, I just basically asked you your opinion, what you think about that as an alternative. Some people would say if we're in Chicago and gang members are killing each other at record numbers, we got to do something different. Putting them in jail, putting them away in prison, I don't know if that's just replacing another group of people. Is it really solving the problem? You got to get tough on crime, but you don't want to continue to grow up a generation of hardened criminals. So there's got to be something.
Well, you're not growing a generation of hardened criminals. People decide to go into crime. That's like, growing up a generation of football players. We're not growing a generation of football players by having these large cathedrals where we celebrate their accomplishments every Sunday and pay them enormous amounts of money. I mean, everyone can't be in the NFL, but we have from midget football all the way up to, the Brady class.
Right.
We have that whole range, and there's a whole feeder group. Well, everyone even there doesn't go out and play football. People choose crime. They choose crime. Even if you grow up in a crime family, there are plenty of people who grew up, their fathers, mothers was criminals, and they did not go into crime. Just like there's plenty of people whose mothers and fathers are doctors and lawyers, and they don't go into doctor and lawyering. So people choose crime. How society responds to crime, I think, is more the issue. Are we going to allow crime to just go unpunished? Are we going to make excuse for folks who commit crimes because they're people we know, or we have a soft heart for the criminal? I tend to be more biblical toward crime. the old stoning.
Oh, okay.
The Middle East doesn't have a big problem with thieves because they deal with the thieves' hands. Singapore is another place where certain attitudes are different as it relates to crime. So when when the criminal understands that the society doesn't have their back, the whole attitude changes. So I think the path of least resistance, people who want to take what you have and move it over to their column at your expense, this is where the criminal manifests himself.
Well, negotiating with criminals, like what President Joe Biden was able to negotiate what Russia to the release of Brittany Griner, the basketball player. I don't know if you want to use that as an example of negotiating. Brittany was technically incarcerated as a criminal, even though you may look at the crime that she didn't really deserve the sentence that she was sentenced. But someone from the top, the president, was able to get involved and saying, if you release this prisoner from Russia, we'll release this prisoner that you have here in the United States. And sitting down with a guy that is frustrated and he's willing to be a threat to society, but we don't want to continue to see this person gangbanging, shooting people, robbing people, being a nuisance to society. And you find out what exactly he needs. You decide if there's some type of alternative. He may tell you again, I need $1,000 a week. You don't have to worry about me breaking into people's homes, carjacking people, shooting people. As long as you pay me the $1,000 a week, I'm good. You may say there's something wrong with that picture. I'm going to pay you money not to break the law. So the common solution, I think, would be find you a job.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth.
Right.
Out of my mouth, yes.
But then you get into the fact that he may tell you, well, I need $1,000 a week. You may say, I can't find you a job that pays $1,000 a week. He may say, I don't want to deal with this job. So this is where you get into negotiating with a criminal. He's going to give you different excuses why he don't want to do something.
The criminal's always going to have an excuse, and I don't see where we need to negotiate with people who are so myopic in their view of themselves that they're that self-centered that they get to choose how the rest of society needs to treat them in order for them not to break the law. They're not all that in a bag of chips, and until someone's willing to tell them that, they're going to act like petulant criminal thieves. And they no, you don't get to make that decision. I got a better deal for you. You stay your criminal behind out of breaking into people's houses, taking things that don't belong to them, and we'll keep you out of jail.
Okay.
There's a place for people who can't control their impulse to take other people's stuff.
So that's the negotiation process that you would advocate.
Right. Stop raping, robbing, and pillaging, and we'll treat you like a member of the society. As long as you don't want to play by the society's rules, you can't be part of society. It's time out for the 1% of the society determining how the other 99 must acquiesce to their little desires.
But
I don't have that. No.
But the only thing is, when people see from the outside, President Joe Biden can negotiate a release of an inmate in another country for another inmate in the United States. I don't know if that gives people a bad
It should give
message.
people a bad message. I mean, the movie The Lord of War was based loosely on this guy. This is one of the worst human beings on the planet. International arms dealer. And arming up African wars and things along this line. He is the worst of the worst of criminals. A lot of human beings put their lives on the line to catch this guy. People, agents and things like that, who have to kind of like disappear because of the opportunities to get this guy cost them, their anonymity. This is a very, very, very dangerous individual. Now, I do appreciate that as an American citizen that the United States government will come to your aid. I hope that happens if something happened with me. But there's a lot of politicking going on and a lot of social issues going on around this whole exchange. But if high-level criminals that are working for foreign agents that represent governments and entities that have ill intent toward the United States and its people, if they understand that all that needs to be done is to capture an American citizen and they'll negotiate, then you might want to recheck where you go around the world, because as an American citizen, you have value. You could be used as an exchange medium. So either you don't negotiate with terrorists and criminals, or you do. And if you do, then the human assets of us as American citizens traveling abroad, or even being kidnapped here and taken abroad, raises exponentially.
Well, we don't want the United States to fall into like Haiti, where people can kidnap people, rape people, have corruptions, just do anything that they want to do, have gangs take over the country or capital city. But I think the United States in some areas could be headed in that direction.
Well, let's talk about that when we come back.
Okay.
Morning Talk, stick and stay. We'll be right back.
How do you define evil? Is it the pedophile school administrator, or taxation without representation? Is it the gatekeeping community leaders who sell out the very people they are fighting for? Or is evil the politician that puts out lies and takes in cash? However you may classify evil, having to choose the lesser of two evils still leaves you with evil. No wonder so many people don't vote. It's time for constituents to flip the script and leave the plantation of party politics and free your political mind.
Good afternoon. My name is McCauley Tete. I'm a parent to a student in Hartford High, and I would say the program was very good. It taught us a lot about how to deal with our kids, how to handle situations. So I would say it's good for all parents to partake if you can. And our coach was very good. She taught us a lot about the Parents University. So I'm so happy and I'm glad I took part in the Parents University. So thank you so much. Love you. My name is McCauley Tete. Bye.
Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
It's Morning Talk. Welcome back. J. Stan McCauley, along with, I was thinking about this during the break, along with two-time producer of the year for the network, Jonathan Small. That's true.
Yes, I believe that was in 2014. The Producers Awards ceremony that you had. Best guest booker. Competition is not like it was back then when you had more shows. So
you were twice the producer of the year. Yeah,
I really take that as high honor.
Yeah,
Put a lot of effort and time to
actually do
produce a show, get a good quality guest, and learned a lot over the first 5 years when you had it set up a little bit differently as an in-studio format. Now we're doing it via Zoom, which I still love.
Yeah. And we had a lot more. We had a lot more shows and stuff too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Throttled it back just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, actually, believe it or not, this topic of the new migration, I wanted to have that type of show as far back as 2017. It might have been a little bit more difficult at that time because I had to get someone in studio, and I wanted someone that had moved, particularly from the North or Midwest to the South. So this topic I've been working on really on and off for over the past 5 years, and almost like accident it came across today because, like I say, I had another show guests already booked up into Friday, and the person just had to cancel. So again, I just wanted to get this type of topic done at some point. Could have talked to Byron about many other different topics, but this definitely was something I wanted to really take advantage of. And then as I'm looking along about Atlanta and different issues going on, and I sent you a link, Pastor Jamal Bryant is in favor of having cannabis basically sold and marketed out of his church, New Birth Ministry.
New Birth is what are they trying to become, the poster child for like worse ministries?
Well, I know you don't agree with that idea even of having the church involved in selling cannabis. But see, he's saying that he could get people in the congregation. He could work with these people. Some people say he's looking at the lucrative side of
absolutely.
it too. Absolutely. So he's not
absolutely looking at the lucrative side. I saw the clip that you sent, and he's like, he can get people to. He doesn't even need a pamphlet or a flyer. Folk will come to church, because they because of the pot.
Yeah.
The weed, as he calls it.
Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, I don't agree with bringing it into the church. Now, I think if you want to set up an outside business someplace else and you want to set up cannabis, that's his own personal choice. It may not be,
instead of the church having a pot store.
Well, again, I mean, I don't really, because it's not my area that I'm involved with, but it's here. See, this is the point I think we got to get at society. Things are here now, whether we like it or don't like it. Somebody's going to make money off of that.
That is true. Someone's going to make money, but I beseech ye, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your body a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, just because it's here doesn't mean you have to conform to it.
I agree.
Everyone's taking the road signs off. If people are taking off the directions to the road, they're taking off the guardrails. I mean, it's here. We should just take the guardrails off the road. And if it gets foggy, people are going to have to slow down when they drive.
Yeah.
No.
Well,
no.
The point is, we want to have a better society. Now, how we go about having a better society, we can debate about that. Do we want to legalize to keep marijuana now? It is legalized in Connecticut. So what do? You just let somebody else profit off it? You say it's not for you. You don't think it sets the right image. It's not. We want people to have their own clear mind of thinking.
Absolutely. You know what people are profiting off of?
What?
Coding.
Yeah.
Yeah, computer coding, game design.
Game design.
People are profiting off of automobile maintenance,
Right.
off of contracting. Why not do that? People profit off of everything. They profit off of selling fish, watermelon. People profit off of everything. Why is now the only way to capture profit by selling cannabis?
Well, I think some areas requires more technical. It's like, okay, people can go off to higher education. You can learn a vocational trade. So you don't really have to sell drugs. You don't have to engage in prostitution, OnlyFans now, selling your body. But if you're only equipped with this way of thinking you can generate income, you don't want to put the time and effort into learning something else. You figure it's the easy path, buying a product, selling it. As long as I have the money to buy drugs or learn how to market drugs, I think it's just like an easier road for some people to fit into.
You could buy Coca-Cola and resell it. Get your little vending machine.
And people are doing that. I had mentioned that idea about buying vending machines.
Right. They should have cannabis vending machine.
Right.
Never mind the store and all of this, $350,000 upfront fee. Just get your little vending machine license. You put your little roll up in there and be good to go. I'm not a fan of altered state of consciousness induced by an outside entity, whether it's cigarettes, smoking, drinking, anything that alters your capacity to stay sober.
Right.
Is not for me. I can't speak for other people.
Well, I think it's also immoral too. I think some things you're not in favor of immoral. I mean, you're not in favor of bringing this network into a level because you're not driven by profit. You're driven by the message. The compromise is, how could I be able to sit down and talk to you towards providing the message and still generating a profit? It's just hard to really do.
You can't.
To do both.
Right. So, like, say, you talked about having a Judge Coleman on. Now, Judge Coleman made the rounds for all of the shows, as will everyone else who runs. When I ran, I made the rounds. So you get invited on all of the talk shows. You get 10 minutes?
About that. 10, 12, something in that range.
10, 12 minutes. If you're fortunate and they kind of like you, you might get 15. But no one's going to give you 90 minutes. No one's going to give you an hour. Ask substantive questions where you can actually put your stuff out. They're not going to do that. They're not. We do those kinds of things.
We do those kind of things.
You wouldn't be allowed to do that if you were working for one of the networks. And so we have the flexibility to do things, which is why I started this.
Right.
So I didn't start this to do money. Or I would be there. I would be working at NBC or CBS. If that's what I wanted to do. I wouldn't be here.
Okay, I agree with that concept. The only thing I'm saying is we gotta almost reach people where they are at. I mean, we may have this expectations that people gotta reach us where we're at. And if Eric Coleman is looking at different alternatives to even sit down and have a discussion, I think sometimes people are finding themselves not even being heard. People who need assistance, people who need certain guidance, they may feel like they're lost. I mean, believe me, Stan, I try at certain times to reach high people, unrealistic sometimes, thinking you're going to get connected with the governor. I wasn't disheartened. I was a little disappointed that the governor was not a guest on this format, but I do understand the whole business ramifications, not to take that personal. There was other things I felt the network and the community needed to implement towards an urban plan that I really didn't see exist. But again, I got to be realistic. When you're moving up to high levels of the governorship and you're trying to get things advocated that you really feel needs to be implemented, it's not going to be an easy path or easy decision to sit down and negotiate. Almost like the criminals negotiating what if Eric Coleman becomes mayor. I think he would be willing to sit down and talk to people honestly and openly about some of the issues that they're dealing with. I'm saying that to say, when you got people whose lives are at stake and they feel like they're being ignored and basically not taken serious, it could get to your psyche after a while. The format, actually, the show that we was planning to have on was going to talk about mental illness and suicide on prevention. We have people in our society now who are under or falling into mental illness issues, suicidal issues possibly. I don't know too much about suicidal issues. That's why the show really would have been an interesting format. We don't have the luxury anymore, Stan, or we didn't have the luxury, or we shouldn't think we have the luxury to think that what we are advocating is just going to be implemented because it's what we want. Sometimes you got to force things to happen to make things happen. And I don't know if you're satisfied with how the whole governorship went. I think you was kind of saying that you were staying neutral. I don't think you was even really too much looking for any urban agenda, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I would have loved to have seen an urban agenda, but they didn't have one. So I mean,
right?
You can't make a cow. You can't milk a cow and get Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say we lost the opportunity. I hate to feel like you had an opportunity to get something.
You didn't lose an opportunity. There was. You know what? I always phrase it like this. It's nice to have a seat at the table, and you really can't ask for anything more than that. To be heard. Once that happens, now the chips fall where they may. It's one thing to be locked out or to never have been heard. It's another thing to have been heard. But once you've been heard, you are one voice among a whole multitude. And in the grand scheme of things, while it seems important to me, in the grand scheme, it may not be that important. It's important to me. It's important to the people who I'm with. But when you have 2.5 million people, your little crew of 30 doesn't really push the needle. We may think it does. We may want it to. But it doesn't sometimes. And that's, so then it becomes what is in the best interest of the greater good. So, I thought that it would be a great opportunity for the Republican candidate to have a voice here, considering that the Republican candidate wasn't resonating and wasn't talking to people of color, black folk. This would have been a great opportunity, but they didn't see it as such.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to speak for Dr. Claude Anderson's because I'm not at his level. He has experience in working towards an economic plan. He believes in a political plan. But I think if you was to present to him, and we just mentioned earlier about the fact Connecticut only has 3 minorities, again, as mayor out of 169 cities and towns.
I didn't know it was that low.
Yes, it is.
But that speaks, as we were saying, that speaks more to the voters than the state.
The state. You're just not voting for people that look.
Right. Hartford's mayor is Caucasian. There is no Caucasian majority in Hartford.
No. So people just saying that they're voting for this particular person that happens to be a Caucasian.
Right. So either they're voting for him because they are in line with his policies, or they have a factor of trust with him. All right. Because at some point, if we are to embrace the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King, then what color people are no longer becomes relevant in the vote.
Right.
So if the color is relevant, then the people of color are not voting for people of color. That's not anyone's issue other than theirs.
Well, again, I mean, I don't know who else is going to be running for mayor here in Hartford. I would assume there's going to be other candidates.
There will be other candidates, yes.
Right. And I'm not going to say I'm going to vote for someone just because they are black and I'm black.
Mm-hmm.
But some people would say a person that has your experience can kind of relate to you a little bit differently. I mean, maybe they may be more sympathetic. Some mayors or people are not going to willing to sit down with criminals saying, oh, no, we're not. I think even you yourself would sit down and talk to people. You're not going to negotiate with a criminal on their terms. But at least you're going to listen. Maybe you might be willing to listen to what they have to say.
I will listen to anybody, as is evident over 40 years of covering folks that I don't agree with all the time.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a problem listening to people who don't agree with me. In fact, I would prefer to listen to someone who doesn't agree with me more than someone who does. I don't need my own thoughts to be validated by anybody. I have enough confidence in my own head and my own thoughts that I'm good with the way I think.
Right.
I want to hear from people who don't think like me, because if I'm wrong, that's where I'm going to hear it. I'm not going to hear it from people who are agreeing with me. You know, so I think we do ourselves a disservice by not listening to opposing points of view and differing points of view. And so why wouldn't you listen?
Right.
But some people don't they want to silence anybody that doesn't agree with them.
Well, you see, again, I mean, having a mayor that point blank, if I tried to book him as a guest, just is not going to come on the show. Now, it may not have nothing to do with me. It may have something to do with the network. It may have some other factors, but he's just not going to show up as I've tried to book him on. So
you talk about the mayor,
Luke Broner, yes. I mean, actually, I had Mayor
him
Broner
on,
but I had him when he was running for mayor, not as mayor.
Right.
And I didn't like the response I didn't like the way the whole process was handled when I did try to book him on the show, and I kind of felt like he just wasn't going to come on the show. There may be some valid reasons for that.
I think there's some pretty valid reasons for that, you know, but he doesn't need to come on. He's the mayor. Now, as a candidate, he came on.
He came on because I think it was to his best interest.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as a candidate not coming on, that's a little bit different. As the mayor not coming on, depending upon why they're being asked to come on, that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, honestly, he'll be on WTIC, but that's a whole different format. I mean, you know, obviously he's on
50,000 watt
flamethrower.
Flamethrower. Yeah, so, you know
I wouldn't.
You're reaching a different audience, doing a different thing.
But I think the thing is, you know, people got to feel, and, you know, everybody got to do their part. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to give the impression that people don't have to do what they need to be doing. But if your issues are being ignored or you're being played and lied to and you're not taken serious, as you said many times, we may have people that just don't have enough money, but they have good characteristics. They're good people. They just don't have any money. So if Hartford has a high poverty rate and people feel like their interests, or there's not even an agenda to really address poverty in our city the way it would be needed to correct poverty, not just, fund more money, continue having more programs, but really try to eliminate and eradicate poverty and then try to move on to other areas. If we're not even really moving in that direction, people don't feel like anything is ever going to happen, they're going to become disheartened. They're going to end up having other issues that's not going to be addressed properly, mental illness, health issues. I think we're headed in some areas down a devastating spiral. And when I hear at least Eric Coleman is willing to look into other ideas that traditionally would never be thought of, I think that's a good sign.
I think it's a great sign. I think that's a sign that you're going to have come forth from many candidates. I do like the idea that you're willing to hear ideas. Respectfully. Hearing ideas is a whole big step away from implementing ideas.
Right.
So I don't care what you want to hear. I want to hear your plan to implement. So where's the implementation of the idea means more to me than the idea, but the idea has to be there first. So picking ideas out of the sky is easy. how are you going to get it through, considering the pushback to the idea?
Right.
All right. How are you going to mitigate poverty when so many people in this community and in this area make their living off of poverty?
Mm-hmm.
Because to get rid of the poverty is to undermine their income.
Right.
You know. So if Hartford becomes a zero crime city, then there's no need for federal funding to fight crime.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no need to fight crime, then, you know, police funding goes down. Other monies that come into the city go down. So a lot of times there's no real intent to solve a problem because the problem in and of itself is somewhat beneficial. So it becomes a vicious circle and a very ugly system that feeds on itself. And so we need to look for candidates or people or thought or thinkers who are life affirming, who put people first, as is evident by their actions, not just words, because words are not action.
Right. But you just said something, you know, I mean, I was thinking when you were making a statement about, you know, eliminating poverty and crime, you know, I look at Bloomfield, which is a town that has a very low crime rate. I would say a moderate to low poverty rate. Mm-hmm. And I think they're doing just fine overall. It's almost like the saying, we can't believe Hartford could look the same way.
It can look the same way.
But do people really believe that it's gonna happen? I mean, it's one thing to say it can be, like you just said. What you an idea and implementing something is two different things.
There's no intentionality to make Hartford and in areas where there's poverty and pockets of poverty different.
Okay.
In my opinion, it's not there. I have a debate with anybody on this subject. It's not there. Because when you try to do something, you accomplish it. We just had a splashdown last night or yesterday, you know, from I think it's the Artemis Project, you know, where they went and mapped the dark side of the moon in anticipation of sending men back to the moon. Mm-hmm. They went to the moon, mapped the moon, went around the moon, came back and landed. That was intentional. Mm-hmm. Someone sat down, planned it, made it happen. When you want something to happen, you plan and you make it happen.
Well, can the mayoral election and a new mayor be able to implement what you just outlined towards making Hartford a much lower poverty rated city? And
if that's what they want to do, they can. You know, people say, well, the mayor can't do all things, and there's a stadium in Hartford. Mm-hmm. That in theory nobody wanted.
Right.
That they protested against. But it's there, isn't it?
Right.
Why? Because Mayor Pedro Segarra wanted it. Mm-hmm. And he did what he had to do and what was necessary to make it happen.
Yes.
To his political career. Cost him being mayor. Mm-hmm. So can something be done? Sure.
Right.
Are you willing to pay the price? That's all. Mm-hmm. And are you intentional about it? Mm-hmm. It's really that simple. Mm-hmm. People do what they intend to do. And conversely, they don't do what they don't want to do.
Stan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel Eric Coleman? I guess that's not fair because we don't know who else is really running. So to say he would be the best candidate to become mayor without seeing the other candidates really wouldn't be fair.
Right. I don't know if he'd be the best candidate.
You don't feel or the best mayor.
Or the best mayor. I have no way of knowing that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could hope so, but I have no way of knowing that. Mm-hmm. And I don't have any way of knowing whoever else is going to run. Mm-hmm. The only people that I could tell you in terms of mayor would be Luke Bronin, mm-hmm. Eddie Perez, Pedro Segarra, Thurman Milner. Mm-hmm. I can only talk to the people who actually have had the office. The people who haven't had the office, there's no way to know that.
Right.
So that has to be established between now and election day. And so what we're going to do is make sure we bring you as much coverage of the process as we can in terms of interviews, covering forums, so that the constituents of Hartford can hear about the people who are applying for the job of mayor to represent them as an elected official. Then we can say which of these individuals do we think will be the better of the pack.
Well, that's fair enough. And again, if I don't get Senator Cohen, I'm booked next week with another guest. I'm working on
You got plenty of time.
So there's no rush. But if you ever, you got a Wednesday format show, I mean, you can bring them on more than
there's
one.
a lot of guests. We got 3 hosts, 3 standing hosts on the program, co-hosts.
So you don't need.
So ideally, all of the candidates that run would have an opportunity to have a conversation with all 3 hosts.
All 3 hosts, right?
Right.
All right. Well, again, I mean, that's a lot of things to really look into about dramatic changes. If anything in life was easy, it would already be done and everybody would be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So some things are not designed to be easy. I don't think it should be feeling like it's impossible and hopeless neither. And when we get into high poverty and high crime and neglect in some of our areas of the city and throughout the country, the willingness is just probably not really going to be there for a while unless you get something dramatic to happen. But at least look into some unique ideas. And I know where you stand about churches involved with marijuana. That's a dead no, and I respect that, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
Negotiating with criminals, I don't think you believe in that neither. So, I mean, some things we got to be realistic towards.
Only to the degree that it's practical. If there's a practical reason for negotiating, you negotiate. But I'll tell you my philosophy on negotiating after we get off the air.
Yeah, okay.
All right, but our time's run out, Jonathan.
All right.
So
nice time this morning.
Great guest. Thank you.
Right.
And you all out there, you all go and have yourself a fabulous rest of the day. I'm looking out the window. I see the sun coming out. It's still snowy, but the sun's coming out. So you all go out and have a fabulous rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
My name is J. Stan McCauley, and I do business as Light Source Productions. I provide professional services in the area of strategic video communications. First, what we do is we help you craft your message using what I call the rule of the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and why. We do event documentation, content acquisition, full-scale productions, editing, and of course distribution through our social media television network. And with social media, video is more important now than it has ever been. Whether you're talking big business, small business, nonprofit, church, or just an individual. Let's say you plan you're planning an event, a wedding, whatever the case may be. But let's say a big event, but no video. And you spent all this time, all these hours to put this event on, and maybe 100, 200 people attend the event. But more important than that is that thousands could attend by watching it on social media. But of course, you don't think about this until after the event is over. You can't afford not to capture it for social media. And despite what people think, I am affordable. Give me a call. Let's plan your next video project and share it with the world on my social media television network. I promise you that you will have the attention of one person, me.